Carl Sagan warned, "Think critically, or old age will come sooner." Carl Sagan was not only a celebrated astronomer, but a tireless advocate for scientific inquiry and rational thinking. His personal and professional life were guided by the belief that every human being holds the potential to explore cosmic mysteries and everyday curiosities with a healthy dose of skepticism and awe. His warning that failing to think critically accelerates our slide into a stagnant, prematurely old state of mind challenges each of us to stay mentally alive. By the end of this journey, a surprising twist will be revealed, one that might make you reconsider how you approach both scientific wonder and the natural process of aging. From his earliest years, Carl Sagan was fascinated by the stars. Growing up in Brooklyn, he would look at the night sky and wonder what mysteries the glimmering points of light held. Encouraged by his parents, he devoured books on astronomy. Even as a child, he demonstrated an unusual capacity to question established beliefs. While others might be content with the standard explanations, Sagan dug deeper, asking, "How do we know that?" This question would become a trademark of his thinking, defining how he approached everything from alien life to the chemistry of life on Earth. He attended the University of Chicago and began delving into research on planetary science, quickly rising through the academic ranks. What set him apart was not merely his intelligence, but his ability to remain curious about even the most fundamental questions. He wrote papers about the greenhouse effect on Venus, planetary atmospheres, the potential for life on Mars, and more. As Sagan's reputation grew, he became a fixture in both scientific circles and popular media. He had an uncanny gift for explaining complex cosmic ideas in a manner that was both rigorous and enchanting. Yet, beneath his public persona lay a deeper philosophy. Sagan believed that critical thinking was more than an academic exercise. It was a habit that could keep the mind flexible and inquisitive, potentially warding off the kind of mental stagnation that makes people feel old long before their time. He argued that many individuals slip into autopilot, ceasing to question, ceasing to learn. In this state, the mind becomes rigid, losing the nimbleness that characterizes youth. Sagan believed that cultivating skepticism and curiosity was akin to a daily workout for the brain, keeping it active and healthy. He often referred to the demon-haunted world as an analogy for the landscape of misinformation. Myths, superstitions, and pseudoscience could creep in wherever critical thought was absent. Once these took root, they gradually dulled the mind's ability to question reality. Sagan saw this as the path to a kind of mental old age, where people become set in their ways, resistant to new data, and unwilling to revise outdated ideas. True youthfulness, in Sagan's view, had less to do with physical age and more to do with a willingness to re-examine beliefs in the light of fresh evidence. The early days of his career found him working at prestigious institutions like the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory and then as a lecturer at Harvard University. While at Harvard, Sagan was somewhat of a maverick, pursuing unconventional topics. He studied the origin of life, dabbling in biology, chemistry, and astronomy to piece together theories about how earthly life might have begun. It was there that he picked up the notion that life might not be confined to Earth, an idea that propelled him to become one of the leading minds behind the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. His public reach exploded when he joined forces with NASA on missions like the Viking probes to Mars, the Voyager Golden Record project, and later, the Cosmos television series. In all these endeavors, the common thread was Sagan's devotion to a rational, wonder-filled approach. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, he would often say. This principle underpinned his worldview, guarding him against the pitfalls of uncritical acceptance of new ideas. Yet, Sagan was not an unfeeling skeptic. Far from it. His sense of wonder rivaled that of any mystic. He found poetry in scientific discovery, marveling at the vastness of space. His spirituality, if one could call it that, was grounded in the awesome scale of the cosmos and the delicate interplay of natural laws. He often spoke of the pale blue, the the image of Earth taken by the Voyager spacecraft from a distance of about 6 billion kilometers. In that tiny speck, floating in a vast cosmic arena, he saw the sum of human history. For Sagan, this perspective was humbling, a reminder to think carefully about our role in the universe. How does this tie into the idea that failing to think critically ages us more quickly? Imagine how a child approaches the world. Everything is new. Everything is subject to questioning. Why is the sky blue? Where does the sun go at night? Is there life on other planets? A child's endless queries can be exhausting for adults, but they also reveal a boundless curiosity. Over time, many people stop asking questions. They absorb answers from authority figures or social norms and rarely test these answers against facts. Sagan believed this was an intellectual tragedy, a slow slide into a mental old age characterized by unquestioned assumptions. He recognized, of course, that not everyone is a scientist. But science for Sagan was not just a profession, it was a way of thinking available to anyone. He argued that the essence of science lies in formulating hypotheses and testing them, not in memorizing facts. A housewife, a mechanic, or a high school student can employ the same critical mindset. If you suspect something is amiss in a news story, investigate the source. If someone makes a claim that contradicts known evidence, ask them for proof. This approach keeps the mind alive, agile, and ready to adapt to new data, just as a young mind does. What evidence did Sagan have for this link between critical thinking and remaining youthful? While he was not a medical researcher, he lived through a period of rapid cultural and scientific change. He encountered individuals who clung to old dogmas, refusing to integrate new discoveries. He also met people who welcomed new ideas and remained sharp well into advanced age. Anecdotal though it might be, Sagan's observation was that those who engaged continuously with learning, questioning, and debating often retained a childlike spark, a zest for life. He saw them reading, discussing, occasionally revising their views. They were seldom bored, seldom complacent. One might recall the famous Cosmos series that aired in 1980. In it, Sagan took viewers on a journey through space and time. He explained everything from ancient civilizations' astronomical achievements to the complexities of modern astrophysics. Along the way, he encouraged viewers to remain vigilant about claims that sound too good or too dire to be true. He taught them to look for evidence, to examine patterns, and to remain open to changing their minds. Part of the show's enduring legacy is that it did not merely convey knowledge. It demonstrated how to think like a scientist, how to maintain that flexible attitude that keeps our minds young. Of course, Sagan's success also brought criticism. Some fellow scientists were initially skeptical of his popular style, accusing him of oversimplifying complex ideas. Others took issue with his outspoken stance on political and social issues, such as nuclear weapons and environmentalism. Yet, Sagan believed that silence in the face of real threats was a betrayal of critical thinking itself. He saw political apathy as another expression of uncritical acceptance, a willingness to let others decide the fate of humanity. Engaging critically in political discourse was, to him, another form of intellectual exercise. Now, take a moment to reflect on how you approach everyday information. Do you find yourself automatically accepting headlines, or do you dig deeper, questioning the sources and motivations behind them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Such reflection is at the heart of Sagan's message. He warned that when we let our mental guard down, old age is not just a function of the body deteriorating, but also of the mind becoming rigid. There is a direct line, in his view, between the curiosity of a child exploring the world and the intellectual vigor of an elderly person who remains engaged and critical. Interestingly, Sagan's personal life was laced with scientific romance. He often blended the rational with the emotional, exemplified by his partnership with and Drew Yen. Their collaboration produced some of the most poignant messages sent into space, including the Golden Record. The record carries sounds and images selected to portray the diversity of life and culture on Earth. Their impetus for this project was partly the belief that if other civilizations exist, rational curiosity would likely be a universal trait, enabling any advanced species to find the record and attempt to decode it. The mere hope that someone, somewhere, might do that reflects Sagan's optimism about the power of critical thinking across cosmic distances. He advocated for continuous learning, not just in scientific fields, but also in history, philosophy, art, and culture. Because in Sagan's universe, everything was interconnected. To truly think critically, one could not limit oneself to a narrow specialty. A well-rounded mind is less likely to fall prey to biases or simplistic solutions. For instance, Sagan recognized that understanding the greenhouse effect on Venus had implications for climate change discussions on Earth. If we see what runaway carbon dioxide levels did to Venus, we might think twice about unrestrained emissions on our own planet. Throughout his career, he remained politically vocal. During the Cold War, he and other scientists campaigned to raise awareness about the potential nuclear winter that could follow large-scale nuclear conflict. This stance was rooted in scientific analysis, but also moral concern. Not everyone was delighted by these forays into public policy, but Sagan felt that to remain silent would be to abandon the intellectual rigor that science demands. He was, of course, mortal. In his mid-60s, Sagan battled a rare bone marrow disease. Despite his illness, he continued to write and speak passionately, refusing to surrender to despair or dogmatism. Some of his last works involved reflections on the relationship between science and society. This period of his life demonstrated how his spirit of inquiry never waned. Even in the face of death, he turned to evidence-based medicine, participated in experimental treatments, and kept a clear-eyed perspective on his prognosis. For many, Sagan's final contributions serve as a reminder that critical thought can provide comfort in difficult times. Rather than clinging to false hope or denial, he opted to face reality and make the most rational decisions possible. While his health declined, his mind remained active, indicative of his lifelong crusade against mental stagnation. One might ask, how do we apply Sagan's principle, think critically or old age will come sooner, in our everyday lives? Consider the barrage of information in the digital era. News spreads rapidly. Rumors flourish on social media, and well-meaning people often circulate stories that lack factual basis. Sagan's approach would urge us to slow down, examine claims, and ask for evidence. When confronted with a viral claim, we might do a quick background check. Where did this come from? What data supports it? Are there alternative viewpoints that could refute or refine it? Such habits do not just keep us from spreading misinformation. They keep our minds in a state of intellectual alertness. We become participants in the grand tradition of inquiry rather than passive receptors of data. And in doing so, we tap into a source of youthful vigor. A mind that is engaged in testing, questioning, and pondering is a mind that remains flexible, open, and alive. Think of how Sagan would respond to a modern-day phenomenon like deepfake videos or AI-generated text. He would likely remind us that while the technology is fascinating, we must remain vigilant about how it can be used to manipulate or mislead. He might also see it as another opportunity to adapt our critical thinking skills to a novel context. Because that was the essence of his philosophy. Humans adapt, learn, and grow through continuous questioning of the world around us. Another important aspect of Sagan's work was his love for teaching. In public appearances, he often displayed an almost childlike excitement when unveiling scientific wonders. The rings of Saturn, the methane lakes on Titan, the roiling storms of Jupiter. He spoke of them as though each discovery was a precious gem. This sense of enthusiasm can be contagious. It draws people in and encourages them to investigate further. If we adopt even a fraction of that enthusiasm in our daily routines, we begin to see the world as a place of endless discovery. Rather than letting routine bore us, we can ask simple questions about our surroundings. Why does the neighborhood cat behave this way? What chemical reactions cause certain foods to taste sweet or sour? Could microorganisms in a backyard pond show us anything new? Every question is a doorway to learning, a small but vital exercise in keeping the mind from shutting down. It is worth noting that Sagan's worldview was not without controversy. He was a strong advocate for the idea that science and religion could coexist, provided religion did not attempt to interfere with verifiable scientific facts. This perspective angered some who believed in a more literal interpretation of sacred texts. But Sagan held that critical thinking should be applied everywhere, and that many religious traditions are metaphorically rich rather than literal scientific accounts. In personal conversations, he often came across as gentle and compassionate, even when disagreeing with someone's premise. He understood that dismissing or belittling people for their beliefs often pushed them further away. Instead, he tried to nurture curiosity, leaving the door open for them to investigate their own beliefs. This approach is another lesson in critical thinking. It is not just about data. It is also about empathy, communication, and the willingness to guide others without alienating them. If we examine the lives of those who remain vibrant into their 80s and 90s, we often find that they share a common trait. They stay engaged with the world. Some do crossword puzzles, read voraciously, learn new languages, or volunteer in community activities. Sagan's stance would be that underneath all these activities lies an active curiosity, a refusal to accept the status quo without question. That mental engagement can be as crucial as physical health in staving off the feeling of being old. He also recognized that critical thinking was a skill to be learned and practiced, not an innate trait that some possess from birth. Like a muscle, it could be strengthened or allowed to atrophy. Each time we read an article and ask ourselves, what is the evidence for this? We are doing a mental repetition. Over time, such habits become second nature. The mind becomes adept at sorting wheat from chaff, at seeing through propaganda and spin. Ultimately, this contributes to a sharper, younger outlook on life. Here is a question for you. Have you ever reconsidered a long-held belief because of new evidence or a compelling argument? And how did it make you feel to change your perspective? Share your experience in the comments if you like. This question goes right to the heart of Sagan's message. Changing one's mind can be liberating, a testament to the mind's ongoing flexibility. It contradicts the notion that we must remain locked into old opinions simply for the sake of consistency. Sagan argued that consistency is overrated if it perpetuates errors. True courage, he said, lies in admitting when we are wrong and moving forward. Throughout his works, including The Dragons of Eden, Broca's Brain, and The Demon-Haunted World, Sagan stressed that critical thinking is a precious commodity in modern society. The Dragons of Eden explored the evolution of human intelligence. Broca's Brain touched on various marvels of science, and The Demon-Haunted World focused on debunking pseudoscience. All these texts wove together a common thread. We must not let our guard down. The moment we do, we risk not only believing falsehoods, but also losing the youthful spark of intellectual curiosity that makes life worth living. Sagan's approach to critical thought was not cold or mechanistic. Rather, it was infused with a sense of wonder at how the universe can be understood through reason. He believed that rationality and awe were not opposites, but perfect complements. The more we understand the natural processes that create stars, galaxies, and life, the more awe-inspiring it all becomes. Think of it like this. If you do not understand how a rainbow is formed, you might find it beautiful but mysterious. Once you learn about refraction, reflection, and dispersion, you do not lose the beauty. You gain an additional layer of wonder at the laws of physics that create such a spectacle. In a similar vein, Sagan argued that once people see the power of scientific thinking in unraveling mysteries, they will be less tempted to retreat into superstition. Superstition, in his eyes, was a symptom of mental stagnation, an unwillingness to probe for deeper answers. But there was also empathy in his critique, for he understood that superstition often flourishes where ignorance and fear hold sway. His mission was not to mock, but to enlighten, believing that a well-informed, critically thinking populace is the best defense against the slow mental decay that leads to cynicism and intellectual weariness. Despite his emphasis on logic, Sagan was a dreamer. He believed in the potential for human progress, in part because reason offers a pathway to solve the greatest challenges we face. War, environmental crises, and social injustice might all be mitigated if only we approach them with humility, data, and a willingness to test solutions. He saw them as solvable problems rather than inevitable fates, provided we keep our mental faculties sharp. Now, let us move toward the unexpected twist we promised from the beginning. We have journeyed through Sagan's philosophy, his emphasis on critical thinking, his scientific endeavors, and how all of this is tied to preserving mental youth. But here's the surprising part. Sagan, who was so vocal about science, once admitted that he, too, struggled with biases and preconceptions. He was a human being, after all, prone to error and overconfidence at times. Yet, he did not see this as a contradiction. Instead, he viewed it as a reminder that the battle to think clearly is never won once and for all. It is a perpetual process, one that demands vigilance. That is the twist. You do not simply arrive at critical thinking as if it is a destination. You commit to it day after day, test after test, question after question. By acknowledging his own fallibility, Sagan demonstrated the very humility that keeps a person's mind youthful. It is a dynamic state, not a static one. The moment you believe you have mastered critical thinking and have nothing more to learn, you begin to slide toward mental complacency, the very aging of the mind he cautioned against. Recognizing that we will always have blind spots is liberating because it sets us on a path of continual growth. It frees us from the illusion of final answers, encouraging us to refine and adapt our views in the light of new information. In this sense, the process of thinking critically is also a process of staying young at heart, open to surprises, and willing to be amazed by what we discover next. Consider Sagan's legacy, the robotic explorers on Mars, the distant Voyager probes still sending signals, the enthralling images from deep space telescopes. These feats are direct descendants of a mindset that values evidence, curiosity, and the constant testing of theories. Yet Sagan would remind us that the same mindset can be applied to everyday life, whether choosing what food to eat or evaluating conflicting reports on a social issue. The cosmic drama and the kitchen table are, in principle, governed by the same laws of reason and observation. There is a certain comfort in that universality, a reminder that no matter how small or mundane our questions might seem, they deserve honest investigation. And if we keep asking those questions, keep refining our beliefs, we emulate Sagan's refusal to let intellectual stagnation take hold. We remain agile, more resistant to cynicism, and perhaps better prepared to face the inevitable challenges of aging. In his final years, despite his physical ailments, Sagan retained the sparkle of a man still profoundly curious about the world. His eyes lit up when he encountered a new scientific discovery or a thought-provoking question from a student. This was not just personality. It was the result of decades spent in the practice of thinking critically and embracing the wonder of existence. His mind did not retire into the usual lethargy that sometimes accompanies age, because he refused to let it. Now, as we approach the end of our narrative, it is time to ask you one final question. If you could incorporate one daily habit to exercise your critical thinking, such as questioning one assumption each day or reading something outside your comfort zone, what would that habit be, and how might it keep your mind young? That question encapsulates the core of Sagan's legacy. It is a challenge to every viewer or reader to find tangible ways to keep their curiosity alive, their skepticism active, and their wonder intact. By continuously engaging with the world in this manner, we guard ourselves against the creeping complacency that accelerates a premature old age of the mind. In the end, Sagan's warning, "Think critically, or old age will come sooner," is not a grim prophecy, but a hopeful reminder that we have a choice. Every time we evaluate a claim, seek evidence, and remain open to being proven wrong, we breathe new life into our intellect. We stave off the mental dullness that can descend upon those who accept the world at face value. And in the cosmic sense of time, a few decades of mental vigor can mean the difference between discovering new truths or remaining shackled to outdated illusions. May we heed his advice, and in doing so, retain the spark of youth that comes from perpetual questioning. Carl Sagan's life showed us that even as the body grows older, the mind can stay eternally curious. If only we keep feeding it the steady diet of inquiry and rational exploration that it so desperately needs.